So welcome. We are now in our equity-based conversation series, and we have with us the esteemed James Butler. This is a treat, everyone. This is a great treat. So thank you for joining us. We are about to start a mindful moment with James because that's like what he does. He's magical. He's got a whole YouTube series, live Twitter feed, the whole nine, where he is offering social emotional learning lessons as well as mindfulness activities in only a few minutes every day that you can access for yourself and for your classes. James has 14 years of teaching experience, mostly in pre-K and K. And in 2014, James was named Austin School District's Teacher of the Year. And in 2009, James volunteered as a high school English and math teacher at Manjetti, if I'm saying that correctly, combined school in Namibia, which is in Africa, for those of you who don't know. And excited to hear about that aspect as well. And he wrote a mindfulness curriculum for elementary schools called Mindful Classrooms, the Educator Guide. It's being used in over 60 schools and camps in 6 different states. And he joined the SEL team for Austin School District in July 2016 as the mindfulness specialist. He's also entrepreneurial and has his own work around mindfulness. And so we're going to be in for a huge treat today. Thank you for joining us, James, and excited about you working your magic to get us centered. So let's do this.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Tovi. I appreciate the invitation to be here. Thank you, Tracy. So let's get started with a mindful moment, y'all. So just to get started, I invite you to just take a moment and check in with your body. Check in with your body and maybe ask yourself, if your body could talk, what would it say right now? And just every now and again throughout the day, the importance of just checking in with our body. Our body's always talking to us and always telling us how it's doing, how we're doing, sometimes before we even are able to tell. So just having those moments to check in with your body. And let's just take a nice deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And I invite you to look around your space and find one thing to focus on and notice details of that one thing. Notice colors, shapes, patterns. And then I invite you to either close your eyes or just look down and listen in and hone in on one sound that you can hear. And again, notice details of that sound. Is it the same? Does it kind of vibrate at all? Does it move at all? And then I invite you to, wherever you're at, you don't have to get up, but just find something that you can touch, maybe that you can pick up, that you can hold, and notice the texture. Is it soft? Is it hard? Is it rough or smooth? Just bring all your attention to your sense of touch. And I invite you to take a couple breaths in and out through your nose. And notice any smells that arise. And if you want to use your hands to help out, or maybe even your shirt. Sometimes I use this as a laundry check. It's time for laundry, but just notice any smells that arise. And lastly, your sense of taste. What do you notice? Even if it's nothing, that's a noticing. And I invite you to place one hand on your heart And think about who or what you are grateful for in this moment. And hold on to that person or to that thing that you are grateful for. And take another deep breath. Whenever you're ready, you can bring your attention back to the space. Bring your hands down. And we'll begin. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you so much for that. Really, really lovely. Thank you. And in my excitement of having James here with us this month for our equity conversation, I forgot to introduce our esteemed founder of COSEM, Tracy Heilers, who's here with us on the call. She's the one in the green t-shirt. And I'm Tovi Scruggs-Hussein, and I'm president of the board of COSEM, and really, really honored to hold that role. So let's dig in. Tell us how you started your own mindfulness journey in your own practice and what that might even look like. What does your daily practice look like?
Yeah, so my mindfulness journey started about 10 years ago. I had just returned from my teaching gig in Namibia and was teaching kindergarten in Austin, and really like I fell into a deep depression and anxiety, was diagnosed with PTSD from trauma in my childhood, and hadn't dealt with it. I haven't really, I was 30 at the time. I hadn't dealt with any of the trauma that I experienced, and learned about mindfulness and therapy, and started using it in my classroom because I was noticing that, as we all know, that when we're having a hard time, that sometimes that can seep into our relationships or our professional life. And it totally was. And so I found this really cheesy yoga YouTube video to use with my students, to really just for them to it was I think it was called the sun dance. And it was it was like sun salutations with song and dance and everything. So the kids are teaching kindergarten, and it's downward dog, and there's songs and there's barking. The kids are like, barf, 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 barf. And I'm just really getting myself centered and focused. And it helped me so much to really be present for my students, and to be able to hear my students, and to be able to see their actions and behaviors with compassion, and to see to the root of what was causing the actions and the behaviors, rather than just seeing something happen, like what's really going on, what's causing this. And it just helped me be just a way better teacher. And then I noticed how much it was helping them. They were really managing their emotions. They were using their words more often to solve problems. They didn't need my assistance as much. And I was like, what is going on? This mindfulness stuff is magic. So then I just kept using it in the classroom, and now in my role, and just personally, especially over the last 6 months during COVID. Mindfulness it's not hyperbole, it's saved me. I have a lot of stuff, like I mentioned, from my past, has come up in ways that I did not anticipate. So I've bumped up my daily mindfulness to an hour every morning. And it started out with 5 minutes. So for anybody who's on the call that's never practiced, that doesn't have a practice, don't start with an hour. Just a few minutes, weave it into whatever. Mine started with my coffee, waiting for my coffee to get ready for 5 minutes. But I do, now I do a little check-in, a little mind, body, heart check-in. And then I go for a walk with my dog, and I set an intention as I'm walking around the neighborhood, because I've been walking around this neighborhood for 6 months. So looking for something new, noticing things that are new. And every morning I find something new. So setting an intention for my walk, and then I come back and I journal, and then I sit and I meditate for about 15 minutes. So in the journaling part, I have prompts. I used to just journal, just whatever came up, and I actually noticed that it was starting to activate me, because I was not being kind to myself when I was journaling without the prompts. I was kind of stressing about stuff that happened in yesterday, or, you know, what's going to happen later, and just not with a positive self-talk frame. So I have prompts. I have two different prompts that are growth opportunities. One is for mental health, and then one is for anti-racism. That's just been really, really, really helpful, just to kind of set myself and to set intentions for myself in a positive frame for the rest of the day.
Wonderful, thank you. What you really hit on too is how you've gone from the 5 minutes to an hour. I know, just given that we're in a pandemic right now, and also in all this racial unrest, I too have really increased my meditation time to almost an hour every day, and how necessary it has been. And sometimes it still doesn't feel like enough. And, you know, taking deep breaths even throughout the day, or needing to do something in the evening, just this whole undercurrent, I think that we're picking up on, just with all that's happening in the world, and, you know, with social media and sometimes the news. So really inspiring too, to hear that you've increased your practice time as not really a coping mechanism, but as like resilience building, right? Like just, yeah. And the importance of the aspect of how this creates resilience in us. Speaking of resilience too, what are some of your self-care practices? I mean, you know, this is an equity-based conversation, so I have always considered you an equity warrior from the time we met, and the interrupting that you did in the workshop at COSEM when we were there at the conference. And y'all, I can't tell the story, but oh my gosh, James totally interrupted a very inappropriate comment that was said as we facilitators kind of sat there figuring out, okay, how are we going to interrupt this? We know that we are, but he definitely beat us to the punch, and did so really skillfully. So how is it that you're cultivating your resilience as an equity warrior? How are you staying on the journey? What does self-care look like for you in really these racially tense times?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, that time at the conference, you definitely, you assisted, I think, as you were processing. I remember you being like, does anybody want to say anything? and, and as you were saying that, in my head, I was like, say something, say something, say something. So I appreciated that. And, you know, I noticed like all sorts of like sweaty palms going on, and, you know, very, very nervous. But yeah, I mean, self-care, like different self-care practices that have been, that I have been doing over really the last 6 months, even 3 months, have have revolved around really like just listening to my body and noticing. I just started reading The Body Keeps the Score, and just noticing like how my body reacts during different situations. And especially when talking about, like, ever since George Floyd's murder, like everything that's come up for me, and even in the past several years as I've dove deeper into equity work, just noticing how every time I'm having a conversation about race, or I'm in like an awesome course like Racial Healing Allies, just noticing the stress that might arise, and like the, you know, just literally listening to my body, my hands, and my head and my stomach, and then doing different exercises like taking a couple deep breaths, or even just doing some stretches. That, like, going for a walk every morning is something that came out of listening to my body. I noticed that when I got up in the morning and I tried to sit and just breathe, I was having such a hard time. And I was able to move through that by moving first, is what I've learned through my mindfulness practice, and got a community yoga certification that I finished up last year through Amala Foundation. And what we learned is that, like, sometimes if our nervous system is up here and you're trying to come down, sometimes you actually have to bring it up in order to come down. And the biggest thing that I think about is when I was teaching pre-K in kindergarten, whenever my kids were like just, if I ever tried to be, if I ever was like, all right, friends, let's sit down, crisscross applesauce, and let's take some deep breaths. No, that was not happening. So like they're up here, and then I got up there and I like moved and shaked and we danced, and then we sat down, and then we were able to breathe. So it's a lot of just like I said, just listening to my body, and noticing what arises, especially in difficult conversations, especially talking about race. And like I mentioned, that the morning journal prompts, like I was doing some journaling every morning, and then I took your course, the Racial Healing Allies, and that was one of the activities, was to do a morning or like a daily journal prompt, and you had different prompts for us that all centered around race. And I had a couple before then, and I noticed that I was like, I'll do that one tomorrow. And that really forced me to lean into really thinking about it, and thinking about different characteristics. Like one of the prompts, and y'all have access to the prompts that I've created, but like thinking about white supremacy characteristics like defensiveness, either or thinking, perfectionism, all these things that I have been leaning into for a long, long time, partially because I'm white and because I've been raised white, and just the history there. Then also I noticed that a lot of that, I leaned into a lot of that almost too much out of trying to heal from my past, heal from trauma. So that's a very new kind of like cross intersection that I've been working on and thinking about. But just being super intentional about every day thinking about, writing, talking about race, and being very explicit and intentional about focusing on talking about race with other white people. That's something that's a mistake that I've made in the past, and that I leaned on friends of color, colleagues of color, to talk about race because it felt more comfortable, and I was causing harm. I was creating more burden, more racial burden for my friends and my colleagues, and don't want to do that. So that's also been really, really helpful. That's a really long answer to your question.
No, it's good, because I was going to be asking you and talking to you about, what does your racial healing ally journey kind of look like in terms of, a white man doing his work. And you really already spoke to that, just in terms of the intentionality that it takes, and really the efforting. I mean, there's some efforting there to in a sense go out of your way, which a lot of white people don't one have to do or take time to do, although it is completely needed and necessary to be done. And so the things that you name just speak to the types of things truly that, if you're not a person of color and you don't necessarily get to interact regularly with people of color, the types of things literally intentionally that you have to really do to do your work. And that it is, it almost becomes part of your lifestyle. And it sounds hard. Like, I'm listening to it and it sounds hard in some other ways that, that I don't often consider. And yet at the same time, when I think about the amount of time that I think about race, that I talk about race, that I reflect on my own racial identity, and listening to what it is you're doing, I'm like, okay, now we're both putting some time in to a racialized experience on a daily basis. And I'm just looking at it in a different light, which I think is really insightful. So thank you for sharing that. And I really appreciated you also sharing about the mental health piece earlier. That's another conversation that we have to normalize for people to be more open about, because people need the support, especially now more than ever. Either people's mental health challenges have been exacerbated or being triggered, and it's something new. And, there's so much shame often around it. And so I just really appreciate that you do share that about your own journey, and that people will hopefully see inspiration there, and also learn tools to be of support. So I want to stop talking, and we want to hear and see this fabulous mini lesson that you've put together.
Oh, sweet.
So please go for it.
All right. Share share my screen here. All right. So, so this little mini lesson is based on a presentation that I recently did in Austin ISD, and also a webinar through EdWeb. So this is like a teeny tiny version of it. But I created, so this tiny URL, I don't know, Tracy, can you put that into, is there a chat or share that in some way? But I created a s'more, not the delicious chocolate and marshmallow graham cracker s'more, like an online newsletter for y'all that has a ton of different resources. The PDF to this is on there, as well as some other things. But anyway, so how mindfulness fits into education in our current reality is something that is very, very important to me right now, because we can't just think of mindfulness in education as we used to. It's, you know, we're in a different reality. We're in a pandemic. Racial injustices that have been existing in our country for centuries have come to light. So, and it's really important that we're addressing and we're thinking about this. So I have this little image, the mindfulness, starting with the self, thinking of mindfulness for self, mindfulness in systems, really focusing on equity there, and then mindfulness with our students, keyword with, not to. So yeah, so starting out with the self, I mentioned my personal practice and just the importance, the great importance of having a daily practice. And like I said, it doesn't have to be anything that's you know, that's really extensive. Don't start out with an hour, even just a few minutes. Integrate it into your day. And I put this picture of a basketball hoop because Tovi knows I love sports, and my Cleveland Cavaliers. And I put this here because mindfulness is like like free throws. So you practice your free throws, you practice during practice time, so that when during the game comes time, you go to the free throw line, you have that muscle memory built in. You don't have to overthink it. You do it. You know, you've got that, you know what to do, and you've built it in. You've got the tools to succeed. When you have a daily or a consistent mindfulness practice, it's the same thing. You don't practice mindfulness for like 5 minutes a day, or for me, my hour in the morning. That's like an intentional mindfulness time. But the rest of the day, I'm also practicing mindfulness. When those stressors occur, that's game time. In the morning, that's practice. Throughout the day, when stress happens, that's game time. So thinking about it like that when you're practicing, it helps you throughout the rest of your day. And just this idea that Sean Kent is my mindfulness teacher here in Austin, and we were talking about the brain and neuroplasticity in our training, and he said this very simple but super complex statement of, every time I do something, I'm training myself to do it better. And when he said that, y'all, I was like, whoa. Was like, and I mentioned my past and my mental health struggles, and this light bulb went off, and I was like, I'm so good at talking mess about myself because I do it all the time. Like, that's why. So I'm training myself to do it better, even positive or negative. So thinking about that and creating new pathways. So part of my journaling now is I do positive self-affirmations, and I'm starting to notice that shift away from just negative self-talk. And just the importance of listening to ourselves. Like I mentioned earlier, when I was listening to myself, then I was able to hear my students. So if we listen to ourselves, we can hear our students. Another really, really important part of why we should have that daily practice. And then thinking about our systems with an equity focus, with an equity lens. These are a couple potential pitfalls of mindfulness in education that I've noticed over the past 5 years as my role as the SEL mindfulness specialist. One is that, like, sometimes people think that mindfulness is just, there's one way to practice. You sit crisscross applesauce. Sorry, I can't turn off the pre-K teacher. You sit crisscross applesauce, you close your eyes, and you're still. Like, that's one of a lot of ways. And it's really important to offer up different options and to explore different options for yourselves and especially for your students. and that mindfulness should never, ever be used as punishment. I know that might, in this room, might go without saying, but it's something that needs to be said, because a lot of times I have noticed it being used like, go over to the peace area and do some deep breathing. Like that's that's not what we're trying to. Mindfulness is not supposed to be used as some form of punishment. And then compliance. We're not trying to get kids to be quiet. We're not trying to get kids to be still. We're not trying to get kids to just like fall in line. Mindfulness can be a way that we can help kids find their power and find their genius that already exists within themselves. So it's not this compliance, it's this cultivating. I started reading Cultivating Genius by Goldie Muhammad, and this makes me think of that. So just thinking of those kind of, if wherever you're at in your mindfulness journey in education, just keeping these things in mind. And then just a couple questions that I've been considering, especially over the last 6 months for myself, when it comes to equity in education. So one, absolutely most important, what am I doing regularly to take care of myself? It has to be a focus. And then what am I doing? And this, number two especially, was written from my own white lens. What am I doing to address my own racial consciousness? Reading, journaling. We've recently started a white racial affinity group in our department. So what am I doing to address my own racial consciousness? And then thinking of these questions 3 to 5, my own personal sphere of influence. So who's involved with decision making? Who's not involved? So those, I have those today's mindful moment videos. And I started them out last March when our school shut down and then started going just virtual. And I was doing these mindful moments, and it was just me. And I was the only one who was making the decisions about what was going to be in the videos, who was going to be in the videos. It was just me. And as a white male speaking English, that does not represent the demographics of our school district. So got together with several of my colleagues and listened to some really amazing suggestions. And one of the ideas was to ask for advice, or ask for special guests to be on the mindful moment video. So other teachers, community members, and really leaning into like having and being very intentional about like racial and language diversity, so there's more representation that throughout the district. And then just like, who are the decisions including, who are the excluding, again, kind of that same thing. And then who has physical, mental, and emotional access to what's being offered, who does not. So the physical, like the actual tangible tablets or Wi-Fi or whatever, but that's not it. It's not just about that, having the tablet. The mental access, where are kids at? Like if kids have IEPs, if kids have different learning abilities, are we honoring that? And then emotional access. How are our kids doing? How are our families doing? Checking in with them is what, as we know, when we're really stressed and if we're in survival mode, which a lot of people in our country are right now, especially Black, Indigenous, and people of color. COVID is disproportionately impacting Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our country. How are we doing? Checking in. What do we need? How can we support in any way? So just thinking about these things. This could be like a whole workshop right here. And then there's this quote from Erica Garcia, who's an educator. She wrote this in Edutopia. Equity isn't handing a kid a laptop. It's knowing the systemic conditions that led to the lack of the laptop and working to mitigate them. And that's where I feel like mindfulness is really important, because it takes self-awareness to get here. It takes a deep self-awareness to get here, to recognize that like social awareness. If we're not self-aware, we can't be aware. We can't be as deeply aware as what we need to be throughout our community, and listening to our students and our families and our community. And then the last piece, but certainly not least, our students. So in that s'more that I've created, you have access to all these slides, like I said, these suggestions. These are suggestions about mindfulness implementation, virtual or in person, but like having a personal practice, so important. Focus on stress relief. I used to have to really sell mindfulness as like, and really like talk about why it's important. I don't need to do that anymore because stress is everywhere. So even leaning into that, sometimes I don't even call it mindfulness, y'all. Call it stress relief. And then listening to student voice, connecting with families, doing a loving kindness practice. I have a loving kindness practice that I put on that s'more, especially thinking of our kids. If we're wherever we're at, if we're virtual or if we're hybrid, if we have kids who aren't able to be present virtually or in person, having some type of ritual that honors them and keeps them in the space is really, really important. So doing a loving kindness, and having, thinking about who's not present with us and sending them kind thoughts. Like, may you be, there's 3 phrases that I've been using a lot over the last 6 months is, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you be strong. So just thinking those kind thoughts, thinking about our friends who aren't able to be present and keeping them emotionally with us. Offer choices, lean into gratitude, share science, virtual mindfulness space that I'll show you our mindfulness website here in a minute. That has something like that. And then you can use those today's mindful moment videos. They're pretty sweet. Obviously I'm biased, but and so I mentioned having options. So having options, so presenting something like this, and because sometimes kids, it's really hard to have your entire class doing all of the same exact thing. Sometimes that's just not going to work. But especially thinking about middle school and high school, having options like, do you want to stretch or do you need to move right now? Do you want to tap into your senses? Do you want to do like a little 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? Do you just want to focus on your breath? Or maybe you want to write a gratitude letter or list out who you're grateful for or draw who you're grateful for. Or maybe you just want to doodle. Maybe you just want to draw. It's really, really relaxing. Or maybe you want to color. So having this as an option, I put in that s'more in this exact slide, but interactive. So if you click on the images, it takes you to a video or it takes you to an activity. So you are welcome to use that. And now I want to show y'all the awesome mindfulness website. I love that GIF. Shout out to Parks and Rec. So this is our site. Can be viewed in multiple languages. The today's mindful moment, here we have special guest from this week. We had Jennifer, who she went to Manchester University, where I went in Indiana, and I met her at COSEM. So she did today's mindful moment as a special guest. It was really cool. So a couple things, the practices. This is our virtual mindfulness room. So thinking about, there's some links on here for suggested practice, a physical and mental health menu, and just kind of planning out what you want to do throughout the week. That's something I've been doing for like the last year, and it's been really, really helpful to help hold myself accountable. So a lot of times people think of mindfulness as just calming down. But if you're down, if you're depressed, you don't want to go down, you want to come up. So this page asks you to check in with yourself. And what do you need in this moment? If you need calming, go to the calming page. And there's a bunch of resources in here, community and self-resourcing, honoring what do you already do? What do your students already do? What do your students' families already do to calm down? And asking those questions. But then if you need some resources, here's some breathing gifts. There's some fun gifts on here to help you out with your breath. There's some calm music. Different types of genres. There's some nature scenes and sounds, some guided practices with some of our special guests there. Shout out to Dr. Angela Ward, who works in AISD. She's a mentor of mine. So a lot of different practices. There's some coloring, some online coloring, coloring pages to print, doodling, here we go. And there's why is it important? How does it relieve stress? And then gratitude, again, and then there's the research about why that's important. And then maybe you need something uplifting. Same thing, a bunch of different resources. There's some yoga on here, some uplifting music, some music with lyrics, and then we've got music, just instrumental. Exercise, you're gonna get your dancercise on, go for it, or hip hop fit workout, any of those different things. Energizing breath. There's a couple different ways that you can breathe that can upregulate your nervous system. So a couple of those on here, and then some self-affirmations, some examples of self-affirmations and some science behind that. So you can just explore more. There's a bunch of resources on here. Teachers and staff, there's professional learning that I offer in AISD, but then also throughout, there's stuff that people throughout the country can also use, or the world. And then families, mindfulness at home stuff, and then community resources. Obviously this is for Austin, but check in with your community and what's available, like hunger, hygiene, housing, you know, mental health support, what's out there. So that is the mindfulness website. And this is that s'more that I was talking about that's got a bunch of different resources on there for you. My contact is on there. And that's all I got. That's all I got, Tovi. Is that all right?
You are too much, James. That is absolutely just outstanding. And just thank you for sharing all of those gifts and for what you've developed and what you're gifting to students and families and educators. I mean, it's just phenomenal. The amount of creativity and innovation that you've used to create so much free resource and just to be of support and just giving of it freely is just really, really, beautiful to witness and to see, and you're contributing in such powerful ways to your values and what you believe in around wellness and humanity and dignity with humanity. So thank you for that. I am going to ask you, because you didn't talk about it in the presentation and I wasn't sure. I'm really curious. You know, you're a white male who's gone to and chose to go to Namibia and work with African children. And I'm just curious how that impacted your work with Black children, African-American children, or even other children of color. How was that translated? How did that experience impact you in your work in education and commitment to equity, I would imagine? So.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. I would say, it taught me, so shout out to Mangeti Combined School. It's a magical place. The village of Mangeti is a place that is very, very near and dear to my heart. And it really, like, my students taught me so much about life. But this question specifically about how I interact with and how I teach and how I just like be with Black people in America, or just people of color in general in America, to really, so I would say listen. I learned really how to truly listen and slow down. When I arrived in Mangeti, the students had never had a volunteer before. They'd never had, and I was told this by numerous students and colleagues, or they call them learners in Namibia, which I love. Numerous learners and colleagues, that they never had a white person care for them and like look out for them. And it took 6 months for my students to start to trust me. And I had my first 6 years of teaching were mostly when I was teaching at Wynn Elementary here in Austin. The majority of my students were Black. And when I got to Namibia, and I was kind of like, I had developed amazing relationships at Wynn, students and families. And then I got to Mangeti and I was like, whoa, this is I took it personally at first. I'll be honest, I took it personally at first. And then I really had to slow down and understand that, like, what the magnitude of what I was in, you know, thinking of generations and generations and generations of Black Namibians, that like there was zero trust of white Afrikaners. So, and even like when I left, after the year, I had students write me letters that said, I never thought that I would see a white man eat dinner with a Black man before, and share a dinner plate, and share and be in the same house. But I had to slow down, and I had to not take things personally. And I also had to realize that I'm not a savior. I did not go there with the like conscious thought of like, oh, I'm a white savior. I'm gonna go in there. I'm gonna teach them all my Western white education, and everything's gonna be great. Yeah, I did not consciously think that, but when I got there, it was a very humbling experience in which I was like, whoa, I am not a savior. I am going to slow down. I'm going to listen, and I'm going to support in any way that I can. Mm-hmm. So that helped me coming back. Again, I didn't think when I was teaching my students at Wynn that I like consciously thought I was, you know, being a savior or anything like that, but I definitely had some savior mentality and some savior characteristics, some white savior characteristics that I had to check myself. So that has been really, really helpful now is in my work to really, really slow down and listen and learn. Yeah, and that not a savior. I am, you know, I can help, I can listen, I can be helped. My students have taught me as much as I've taught them, if not more. That's always been the case, and it just became way more crystal clear after my experience in Namibia.
Wow. That's really powerful, really, really powerful. I'm curious too, in what you were sharing, what is your creative process like? You know, a lot of people work on different mindfulness activities, like even selecting, like I was thinking about when you were showing the videos that are offered on the website of the movement videos, the meditations, the music. And I was resting in the equity questions that you offered. So what was the process like to ensure that those resources were inclusive?
Yes, that is something that whenever I'm doing, like when I was doing this website or when I was doing newsletters in the past, it was really, really important for me to show that mindfulness is for everyone. Because if you do a Google searches of mindfulness here in the United States, it doesn't appear to be like it's for everyone. It appears to be like it's for white people, even though mindfulness has its roots started not by white people, you know, by people of color thousands of years ago. And so it's really important to me, and especially understanding the demographics of our district, that there are videos that are in different languages, there are videos that feature different races, ethnicities, and even just different types of music, and understanding that music is incredibly healing, but there's so many different types of music. So making sure that I'm being inclusive there. And there's a little feedback form on the bottom of every page on the website that's like, how can this be better and more inclusive? Let me know, and I'll do that. So it's not a done deal. I'm always learning. I'm still learning and growing. So, but it's a very intentional process, and unfortunately it makes my work go like 2 to 3 times longer for creating anything, because I have to search more. And that's a reality that I like want everybody to like. I wish it wasn't a reality, but it's important to recognize that and be aware of that.
Absolutely. And that's interesting that you're even naming that, because that goes against one of the characteristics of white supremacy, particularly in the workplace, which is this sense of urgency and to always go fast,
Mhm.
fresh, and just get it completed versus having it be really strong and inclusive. And inclusion takes time. That's what I've been really reflecting on lately in terms of supporting districts and companies in their own racial healing work. I laugh. I'm thinking, if someone went to the CFO and basically said, I need to know all of your numerical business financial expertise, and I need to get, what you've gotten in several years in just a few workshops for 3 hours, please, so that I have enough to be the CFO of a company. Like, we'd be laughing. We'd be like, that's foolishness. But that literally is almost like what is being purported, is like, you can fast track this racial healing growth. You can fast track being more inclusive, and not something that can be fast tracked. I mean, you can definitely give it the attention that it needs and work on it, but it takes a lot of time and energy that people are often not making space for. So how do you work with that? Like, how do you balance making space to be inclusive, and how do you support others that you're helping to lead and work with to be more inclusive and make space for it?
Mhm. I mean, I think, honestly, I mentioned the white racial affinity group that we recently started in our SEL department. And that has been huge with regards to that, and just like making space and having those conversations, um, and honestly, a lot of it is sharing our personal experiences, about like our first experience with race and noticing racism. And we're meeting again tomorrow, and our question or prompt is, when was your most recent experience with racism, and how did you contribute to it? So it's like really digging into like the harm that we have caused, um, and just in being there. And that's something that I'm wearing the shirt "Mindfulness for the People" from. I got this from Dr. Angela Rose Black. I went to her institute last summer, disrupting systemic whiteness in the mindfulness movement. Um, and I'll never forget, we did this one activity. It was with Dr. Liston, and we had to partner. It was all white participants, being led by Black women, and we had to partner up and talk about times that we have caused harm to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And our partner was not to coddle us, not to say it's okay. We just had to sit there and own it. And I remember she said, if we want racism to go away, these are the stories you need to be telling your kids and your grandkids. And I was like, oh, yes, like we need to like bring that stuff out of the shadows and talk about this stuff. So really, it's just like it's sharing my own experiences. And I feel like that's how, just sharing my experiences, being vulnerable myself, and I feel like, and also being vulnerable, and even just being empathetic and listening to others, especially other white people, when we're having these conversations. I don't know if that answered your question fully or not.
For the most part,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm also,
There's a
I
part
mean,
that didn't
what you're
yet. Let me
describing.
know.
Oh, no, because what you're describing is systemic, and so it's a start, and that's what it takes. So it takes systemic intentionality of creating space. One, not only to do the work, but to do the work related to the work, which is when I was even saying, taking the time for the extra research, taking time that a process for something may take longer. And just what that can look like, and be okay with that. And that goes against our norm a lot. Not the norm for white people necessarily, but also I think the norm in the culture of the US. And we're always rushing and wanting to get more in less time. And the conditioning that has done, I think, for people in honoring development of our own growth. And I think that we're going to be forced to continue to move out of that way of thinking. And even with school's a prime point to even think about that. I mean, here we are in the pandemic, and we tried to do school right away.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't work. And it was like, no, we're going to have to back up to be able to even proceed. And so it was really uncomfortable, of course, because kids were out of school, but it was like, we're not going to be able to get ready to really be able to do school remotely if we're in school remotely
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. I mean,
Yep.
it's just impossible. So.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, any parting words for us before we talk about the fabulous generosity of your giveaways and announcements? Is there anything you felt like you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to say?
I mean, I think just take care of yourselves. Like, it's so incredibly important to take care of yourselves and to give yourself grace. This is like, I have dedicated that, like, this, especially race work, I'm always going to be doing this, and it's not going to, I'm not like, I don't consider myself woke. I have a hard time with the term woke with regards to white people, because I feel like it signifies, like, it's the past tense. You got there, where it's always, we'll always be there. So having grace, having compassion with yourself, I'm going to step in it, and then just listen and learn when that does happen. So, but none of that can be possible if we're not taking care of ourselves. So listen to yourselves, take care of yourselves. It's really, really, really important.
Whew, absolute truth. Absolute truth. Thank you. So tell us what you got for us. We heard you were bearing gifts.
Yes. So I think one of my love languages is giving gifts to teachers, because I was a classroom teacher for 14 years. So I have two like packages, if you will, and each package includes a sweet Mindful Classrooms book, written by yours truly, and How to Be an Anti-Racist, which is an incredible book that I just finished up by Dr. Kendi. So I have two of each of these, and then along with that is a scholarship to attend your amazing course with Sally and Grace, Racial Healing Allies. It's a really powerful and just an overall great learning experience and growing experience, that I'm excited that y'all have created and brought to us. So so two scholarships. So each package is one of these, or is both of these books, plus a scholarship to enter into Racial Healing Allies. And I guess, Tracy, I don't know how you want to do. You've got the creative brain for making that stuff happen. That I'm not there yet.
Actually, if this works, James, are you okay with me doing Google, like I'm doing a Google random number generator, and then I'll look at my screen here of participants and just count down, and we'll do it that way? Or should we, I kind of announced it on Twitter that you wouldn't have to be, we should.
Oh yeah,
that.
I saw that.
Yeah,
maybe
actually I announced on Twitter and Facebook that if you RSVP'd for this webinar, that I would random generate it and pick winners afterwards. So we'll stick with that.
Okay.
And an email to everybody with the recording of James for everybody to share, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Good. Well, James, thank you. Thank you for the love for the teachers and the gifts, and thank you for the love for everyone, for your gifts that you are sharing with the world. And starting with Austin, but you know, we know it's about to blow up because of what you're already doing in Austin. Like, you know, people are going to be coming for you because they are just fabulous resources, fabulous leadership with a true equity lens. So we just really, really appreciate you sharing that with us today. And again, folks, James has been generous to also give the URL resources. They'll be posted on the COSEM website. And so feel free to visit the website. We encourage you all to take time to visit the website by participating in our Commit to 1% with meditation with at least 10 minutes a day, supporting the book. This is a great book for you to read and discover stories of 40 educators and people leading the way in the mindfulness and education movement. So that's in there, and James has a chapter in there as well. And so, that's always encouraged that people get that book or start reading groups to look at how to bring this and integrate it into schools and classrooms, especially now, because so much of it can be done virtually and be done really well. Starting a COSEM chapter is always great. In fact, California is looking for a chapter lead. So if you're in California and you want to take on a chapter, please reach out to us. And COSEM has a donate button too on the webpage, and it's nonprofit. We are nonprofit. So please feel free to donate regularly and generously, even if it's like $5. It's okay. It's all about supporting what you believe in. And then lastly, if you want to become a racial healing ally by taking the course with Sally, Grace, and I, registration is still open. The course starts in October, and we donate every time a percentage of some of the proceeds to COSEM, because again, it's about mindful allyship and it's continuing to support what we believe in. Finally, 1 month free professional membership with your trial basis if you want tier 1 and tier 2. There are ways to join this new membership community that we are offering. There are tons of benefits of studying and learning from experts and getting resources and getting support and access to thought leaders and practitioners in this work. So please feel free to visit our website at educatingmindfully.org on the membership page. The equity page will be hosting James resources as well, and past presenters resources. So there's so much at COSEM. It'll just take your breath away. So we are thrilled that you joined us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. James, you're getting shout outs and whatnot. So I know that you see those there in the chat. So again, everyone, thank you. James, close us out, would you please?
I sure will. With a little mindful moment.
Whatever you want. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just do this. Let's just feel our feet on the ground, y'all. And just feel and really notice your feet connecting, and take a breath that feels good for you. And know that I am grateful for your presence, and please reach out if I can help in any way. I appreciate y'all so much. Teresa Garcia, my coworker. Oh, hey, friend. Shout out to Teresa. She's the one who gave me that genius idea to get special guests for today's mindful moment.
Nice. Hey, it takes a village. Teamwork makes a dream work.
Yes, it does.
And that's being inclusive. See, that's even an example right there, like honoring feedback and letting others help shape a vision. No vision comes to pass with just the visionary. It always takes people to support the vision. Absolutely. So with that, that's a great time to also thank Tracy for her vision of COSEM and how she has galvanized an entire community of people and practitioners nationwide and internationally. So we are honored to serve COSEM in this way. Stay tuned for the next equity conversation coming your way in October. Then we're going to do October, November. We're going to take a break in December, and then we'll see you back in 2021. Everyone take really good care. Peace and blessings.
Thank you, Toby. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Tracy, thank you. So good seeing y'all.